last session for this portion of the Tadabbur in the Quran, so we don't want to take any time away from this verse, which I didn't realize I would have to cover in one session because of my shortcomings in the planning. But this is one of those jam-packed verses that require a lot of opening up. So inshallah, your fingers are ready to type or write, whichever means you're using to take down the notes, inshallah. Our discussion was with regards to these verses of Surah Al-Imran, and our participants are present. As we always do, inshallah, we'll begin by asking, just right off the bat, Brother Kumail Hassan to please unmute his microphone and tell us what is the meaning of the word sari'u.
The meaning of the word sari'un
Yes, sari'u.
Is to hurry, hasten.
Ahsant, thank you. Hasten, that's the first word. And Sister Kulsum, what is the word maghfira? What does that word mean?
Forgiveness.
Thank you very much. Ahsanti. And finally, just one more. The word arab with an ayn. Arab. Sister Romina, can you please tell us what that word means?
Salam. Sorry, I actually don't know what that word means.
No problem, it's okay. We'll throw it over to Sister Maradhiya. The word arad with an ayn. Araduha.
Is it with?
With, which is different from the word arad with a hamza. When there's a hamza, ra, ba, or bad, it means the word sky. With an ayn, it means with, which is in contrast to the word pool. Pool means length. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I am assuming that the rest of the words you've looked at yourselves. Come with me in this example. Imagine your father is driving a car, or your car, and you've come to a red light. You know where you're going. You know your destination is very important. You know where you're going and that you need to get there quickly. It's an important place that you need to go. And you've arrived at this red light, and for whatever reason, the light turns green, and either your father hasn't realized or he is slow to react. So between the time that the light turns green and he takes his foot off the brake pedal and applies the gas, there's a little bit of time that goes by. In this time that goes by, whether it's a second or two, you turn to your father, seeing that the light has turned green and that he has not apparently reacted. You say, go, right? You say, go. Or you'll say, come on. You say, the light is green. Let's go. These are the words that you're using. You wouldn't look at your father and say, hurry up, hasten. This is not the word that you would use. You know where you're going. You know you need to get there fast. You know you're in a hurry. You know it's a good place. You're eager to get there. But because he stopped at this red light, you wouldn't tell him, now hurry up. You would say, go. Why? Because once you've come to a stop and you're not moving, the first command that you're going to give the person who's not moving is to begin moving. He has not begun yet. So you're saying begin, right? Even on a horse, if the horse isn't moving, you say giddy up, meaning what? Let's begin our journey. But when the horse is not going fast enough, you start to say, come on, go forward faster, increase your speed. There's a different command that's being given here. Why is that the case? Right? Why is it the case that you tell your father to go instead of hurry up? Because the movement has not begun. Very clear, right? The example was clear. You say go as opposed to hurry up. Very clear. Okay. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, Sari'u. Sari'u means hasten, or in our colloquial terms, we'll say hurry, rush. Not rush in a bad way, rush in a good way. Increase your speed. Increase your speed implies that you've already begun moving. Okay. Last week, we spoke about the word ati'u, and we said that ita'a means that you willingly, with your own free will, and a desire, a longing, and from a place of humility, are obeying. You are choosing to obey, no one's forcing you to obey, it's willing. There's this longing or desire involved that you want to obey, and it's from a place of humility. Why do we want to obey? Why is it that we're obeying willingly? What is the reason for why we are obeying? It's because man innately realizes that he has needs on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level, on a spiritual level. Man is needy. أَنْتُمُ الْفُقَرَاءُ إِلَى اللَّهِ. You are needy. Furthermore, you are need. You are faqra. You are need. Everything you are, every part of your being is need. And you realize this. We know that we're in need, and we know that we want to come out of this need, meaning we know that we want to overcome the deficiencies that we have and move towards perfection. Innately, we know this, and innately, we recognize that we must move towards this perfection. So we begin moving. We're already aware of this. We know that we want to move towards that essence, which is the complete and comprehensive collection of perfections. If you're writing this down, there's a very subtle point. The word Allah means the comprehensive collection of perfections, according to Al-Mizan. Side point, but it's a subtle, important point as well. We're moving towards this perfection to come out of this need that we have, or that we want these needs to be fulfilled, basically. So we've already begun moving. If you remember, I made a side point last week, and I said that I don't want to open it up, about Amr Irshadi and Amr Mawlawi. If you recall, for those of you who are taking notes, you should have written this point down. I said I'm not going to open it up, and nonetheless, I mentioned it. For what reason? Because we said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ati'u Allah wa Rasul, He is not telling us something new. It's not that we didn't know that we have to do ita'ah of Allah. We already know this. Our intellect already commands this. How? Because if Allah is the complete, comprehensive collection of perfections, and we innately know that we're in need, and that we innately know that we need to move towards perfection, then we already know that our way of fulfilling our needs and coming out of this state that we're in, or to at least remove some of these barriers that exist, and for those voids that we have to be fulfilled, we must begin to move towards Allah. Meaning, we must obey Allah. And then Allah places a physical living man on the earth for us to take as an example. If that man has been placed on this earth for our guidance and for the filling of these voids that we have, then ita'ah of Allah means ita'ah of this man. So this is all intellectual. We've already recognized this. Because we've already recognized this, we've already begun moving. So Allah doesn't need to say go. He says hurry up. That's why He says sari'u. Hasten, you've already begun the journey. You already know that you need to move towards perfection. You already are willing, for the sake of the love that you have of your own self, to fulfill these needs that you have. You know that you have needs. You want to fulfill the needs because you love yourself. You're going to do anything you can to fulfill those needs. So you've already begun. And therefore Allah is saying, now speed it up. Speed it up. With one point that we didn't mention last week, we said so that perhaps if you do the ita'ah of Allah and the Rasul, perhaps you may receive mercy. We didn't mention this one point, which I think is important. If I can quickly say it, so we don't take away time from this verse, which is that turhamun comes from rahama, rahm. which is a similar word that you might have heard before in reference to something else. Silatur rahim. Rahim meaning womb, a mother's womb. Silatur rahim, when we maintain close ties with our family members. The word is rahim because we're maintaining ties with those individuals that are connected to us by blood, right? Our siblings, our parents, our uncles, our aunts, our cousins, etc. Or specifically our parents and siblings first and foremost, right? They're connected to us by the rahim in one way or another. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ means that this mercy that we are receiving is not just any type of mercy. Rather, when that child is within the womb of the mother, all of his needs that he has are being fulfilled within that womb. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that perhaps all of your needs might be fulfilled. This was an important point, that in the rahim all your needs are fulfilled. If you obey Allah and the Rasul, perhaps all of your needs will be fulfilled. No one asked in the group about why la'alla. One of the I know the time is going, tafsir is like this. When you want to open up the meanings of words and ayat, the time just goes. But la'alla, the reason why we say it means perhaps is because sometimes something has been mentioned in the verse. If you do this, perhaps you'll receive that. It's because this thing that has been mentioned on its own doesn't suffice. There's something else that's there as well. We have ayat that are like this. I would have put it in the group if the sisters and brothers had asked. But sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you do this, la'alla that, perhaps this will happen. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It's because fasting is one of the things that may bring about taqwa, so long as it's coupled with other things as well, right? It's not that fasting on its own will bring about taqwa, it's fasting plus other things as well. Side point, let's go back to our ayah. Those who are writing, we'll just scribble it down quickly and then we can have a discussion on this later. That's the whole point of the group. Now we come to our ayah. We said hasten. Why? Because we've already begun the journey. Now we're just speeding up. We've already begun the journey of fulfilling our needs. Now we want to speed up. Okay. Speed up towards what? Sari'u ila, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to go towards maghfiratin. What is maghfiratin? I believe it was one of the, who was it? It was a brother that told us, right? That told us that maghfirah means forgiveness. Maghfirah comes from ghafara. Ghafara is a very specific meaning of forgiveness. Ghafara is similar to satara. Ya satara al-uyub, ustur uyubana. Satara means to cover. Ghafara also is a form of covering. That when you receive maghfirah, your defects are not only covered, but your defects are destroyed. It's not like when you erase something that you've written in pencil, you can still see the marks that are left behind from the pencil or from the erasing, the eraser shavings or whatever. There's some sort of mark on the paper. It's destroyed. Maghfirah is like this. Hasten towards removing all of your deficiencies from top to bottom. It's completely gone. Now, this is something important. Maghfirah comes from whom? Sari'u ila maghfiratin min rabbikum. You see, we are told that we don't go to paradise on account of our own deeds. It's not like because of our deeds we go to heaven. What does that mean? Does that mean we don't have to do any good deeds? Amal salih is not important anymore. Righteousness can just go out the door, just live however you want. If Allah chooses to have mercy, then I go to heaven. Is that the case? No. What is the role of these good deeds? What is the role of our actions then? If you're saying that at the end of the day, it's because of Allah's mercy you're going to heaven, then what was the good deeds for? The good deeds are a foundation. Meaning once the good deeds have come, once you have performed those good deeds, once from within you have shown your innate goodness and manifested your innate goodness in good actions, upon these foundations, Allah brings the cause, which is His mercy, which yields in the effect of your salvation, your entry into paradise. Or as this ayah says, صاروا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة أرضها السماوات. This Jannah is the effect of Allah's maghfirah. Here, it's a good idea when you're looking at the ayat of the Quran that you also look at other ayat of the Quran as well to better understand what it is that is being said here. For example, those of you who are taking notes can jot down verse 119 of Surah An-Nahl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something very similar. He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لِلَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا السُّوءَ بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ تَابُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَأَصْلَحُوا إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِنْ بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah says that surely your Lord towards those who have done evil or they've committed sins, they've done bad, bijahalatin, out of ignorance. Side point in parenthesis. Every time we do something bad, it's out of ignorance. If you knew that that which you were drinking was poison, you wouldn't have drunk it. You thought it was good for you. You drank it because you thought it was good. So when you drank it, it was out of ignorance. Side point, scribble that down. بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ تَابُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَأَصْلَحُوا. You made a mistake. Then you sought forgiveness afterwards. And then you rectified yourself or your deeds. وَأَصْلَحُوا. You did islah. You fixed what you were doing. You instead of, now you did something bad, and now you've replaced it with something good. You've done something good after you sought forgiveness. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِنْ بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. After that forgiveness that you sought forgiveness. In and of itself, seeking forgiveness is a tawfiq. Allah has given you the opportunity to seek forgiveness. He has permitted you to seek forgiveness. He's opened the way for you to ask for forgiveness. Then out of your own free will, you rectified your actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, min ba'diha, after that, laghafurun rahim. He says, now I bring the cause for the effect of your salvation. You played your role, wonderful. Now I bring your salvation. In another ayah, ayah 17 of Surah Nisa, for example, Allah says, for example, إِنَّمَا التَّوْبَةُ عَلَى اللَّهِ لِلَّذِينَ يَأْمَلُونَ السُّوءَ بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ يَتُوبُونَ مِنْ قَرِيبٍ. Before you die, you seek forgiveness. Meaning you don't leave it till your deathbed. You make a mistake, you seek forgiveness. Min qarib. Quickly. After you sin, you seek forgiveness. فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَتُوبُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. See, it's not that tawbah is me asking forgiveness from Allah. Allah is returning to me. There's one time where I'm going back towards God, then God is coming to me. In fact, to make it more clear, God is coming towards me, metaphorically, right? Obviously not physically, to give me the opportunity to seek forgiveness. I seek forgiveness, so now I'm going towards Allah. Then Allah forgives me. يَتُوبُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. You see the journey? God to me to God, God to me. This God to me is that cause which yields in the effect of paradise or salvation or forgiveness. There are many ayat that are like this. إِن تَجْتَنِبُوا كَبَائِرَ مَا تُنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ نُكَفِّرْ عَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ وَنُدْخِلْكُمْ مُدْخَلًا كَرِيمًا. If you stay away from bad deeds, you do good. Remember we said, what are the effects of your good actions? You do good. You stay away from bad, we'll cover your defects, which is what we wanted. Remember, we wanted our defects to be covered. وَنُدْخِلْكُمْ مُدْخَلًا كَرِيمًا. And we'll make you enter into the gardens, the paradise, in an honorable way. So I can put some ayat that are similar to this concept in the group, inshallah, if I remember to. It's very interesting to look at these other ayat that are similar to what is being mentioned here to get a full and comprehensive understanding that Allah is the cause of our salvation. Allah is the cause of our entry into paradise. Now, when we say entry into paradise, we think that, we live in this world, then we die, then we're raised up again, and then after judgment, we enter into paradise. But if you look at the way this ayah says, سَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ, right? عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. if I'm not mistaken, right? In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just saying that Jannat is for the hereafter. Rather, the worldly aspect of man as well becomes Jannah, meaning the effect of obeying Allah and the religion of Allah, meaning the Rasul. The Rasul is the embodiment of the religion of Allah, meaning when you follow the Sharia, when you follow the laws that the Rasul brought, you're following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That obedience, that ita'ah yields in this Jannah, where not just the hereafter, your life becomes Jannah. Why? Very important. I think I'm hearing the adhan, which means that Sayyid Kamal is going to pray and then he's going to come. Maybe he wanted to teach before adhan, but I didn't allow him. Why? Because when we have these needs, what's the reason for why we have these needs? We have an imbalance. Very, very important. I think, I don't know exactly what Sayyid Kamil has been saying, but I'm 100% sure, just by knowing who he is, that he's been trying to hammer this point home at some point in these sessions, that we are living imbalanced lives, and the way towards perfection is to inculcate balance into our lives. Balance. Because of our imbalances in our shahwa, in our ghadab, in our lust, in our anger, in our imaginative faculties, because of these imbalances, because of prioritizing or allowing other faculties to govern over our intellects, because of this imbalance, we find that we have a lot of issues in our lives. When you obey Allah and the deen of Allah, you bring about balance in your life. In this life itself, you have Jannah. In this life itself, you are living a life of peace and serenity. Your needs are fulfilled here. This Jannah is spread out from this world to the higher realms of existence. Very important point. This deen has not come for your akhirah. This deen definitely is a pathway to a great akhirah, but it's come for this world as well. In fact, it's come for this world to set up your akhirah. Now, we've come to the end of the ayah, which is a bit of an awkward point because I am hearing the adhan. So if I end it here, you're going to have to take a break anyway for salah. If I get an order to stop, I'll stop. If I don't get an order to stop, then let's just say this final point about taqwa, and then I won't have anything else to say anyway. So I'm waiting for the red light to stop from the boss, inshallah. The final point is, who is this for? We said that the width of it is the sama, is the skies, and the earth. For whom? Who is this all for? All of this is for the muttaqeen. Summary: hasten, because we've already begun. Sari'u ila maghfiratin, towards the covering of our deficiencies and forgiveness from Allah. Min rabbikum, your Lord. I didn't mention that. Min rabbikum. Wa jannatin, we mentioned that this Jannah is not just in the akhirah, it's also in the dunya. Arduha as-samawatu wal ardh, it's the width of it's as vast as the heavens and the earth. U'iddat, it's been prepared for للمتقين. Very quickly, we mentioned this in the faith conference over the summer. We mentioned this as well in Muharram before the lectures. We mentioned a few portions of tafsir before the lectures. Those who were present there, either in the conference or in the Muharram lectures at the Al-Mahdi Center, we mentioned this about 2 or 3 times. Very good example, drives the point home, very short and sweet. If studying is something that I do in my week, at some point in the week I study, I use the present tense verb and say I study. Study is a present tense verb. If cooking is something I do from time to time, I'll say I cook. But when I say I am a student, I'm no longer using the verb of study. I am using a noun. I have described myself. I have made it my identity. I have described myself with the noun of student to say that my identity is one who studies. My identity is one who studies. There's a difference between the person who, when he comes home from work, opens up a book, takes a glance at it for half an hour and closes it, and a guy whose identity is studying. One guy studies from time to time. The other guy is one who studies. One guy goes on Fridays or Saturdays to play with his friends. He plays soccer with his friends, 1 hour, 2 hours, and he goes home. Another guy is a soccer player. One person cooks here and there, whenever he wants to, whenever he needs food. There's another person who is a cook, a chef. This noun denotes what? What does this indicate? It means that your identity is one who plays soccer, one who cooks, one who studies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "U'iddat lil-muttaqeen," not lil-ladhina taqaw. In other ayat, we have الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, but then in other places we have مُؤْمِنُونَ إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. In the ayat of Surah Anfal, that inshallah Sayyid Farhan will explain. If there are no unforeseen circumstances, he will explain why إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ is used, and not إِنَّمَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Mu'minun means the person is the embodiment. He has embodied Iman. Iman is part of his identity. The muttaqeen are those whose piety is part of their identity. It's not like they've done an act of piety. Piety is not something they do. Piety is something that they are. They are pious. They don't do piety. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't use the verb doesn't use the word taqwa in the verb form, rather he uses it in a noun form. So who is this Jannah for? This Jannah has been prepared for those who obey. They do ita'ah of Allah. This ita'ah of Allah is not something that they just do. It's something that they have become. They are obedient. They are God conscious. They are pious. They are muttaqeen. This is a process. It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for you to one time here and there do something good. He's saying your entire concern should be ita'ah of me, my sharia, my path, that which I want from you. In everything that you're doing, you need to ask, what does Allah want from me? Sharia, fiqh is such that whatever we do, there is a hukm, there's a law associated with it. What does Allah want? This is very important. I'm going to try to say it as subtly as I can, and I know you sisters and brothers are smart and you'll know what I'm talking about. When you go to the grocery store, you check where your products are made. You check where the money that you are purchasing this product with is going to go. Who is the CEO? Who does he fund? Is your money going into good places or in places that are questionable? No one can come and say, hey man, I'm just going to the grocery store. Don't try to bring your Sharia into the grocery store. Sorry, God's law encompasses everything we do. You can't say I'm an obedient servant of Allah on the musalla when I'm praying at 1:24 p.m. or at 6:25 p.m. When God says, come pray, I pray. But then when I go to the grocery store, I buy anything I want, no matter where the money is going. I invest in any stock, in the marijuana stock, in the defense stock. Just because it yields a good income and a good net profit doesn't mean I can go and invest my money there. The one who is a muttaqi, taqwa encompasses everything he does. He doesn't let it easy. I'll go to any fast food chain restaurant. Doesn't matter what kind of wrap, whatever, important. Inshallah, the point was delivered and you understood what I was trying to say. I'm assuming Sayyid Kamil is ready to take over, and I will sign out. I can see his video is on. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. First of all, there's been a few questions that were asked in the group chat. Let's go through some of those. Some of you guys have put your hands up as well. Jawad had just put his hand up recently.
Oh no, sorry, I was just waving my hand saying goodbye to Hussein. Sorry about that.
So when it comes to people with addictions, the question was asked, what about people with addictions? Would they be counted amongst those who do things out of ignorance? Okay. So consider what addictions are first. So addictions have a gradient to them, correct? Meaning that depending on what you are addicted to, the ruling is different. For example, some of us might be addicted to something that is innately not, let's say, haram. Let's say they're addicted to eating chocolate, right? So they don't eat chocolate all the time, but whenever it's available to them, they like to just really, they love chocolate, and it's to the point where someone can say they're addicted to chocolate. Okay, a particular type of chocolate, perhaps. Other times, perhaps they're addicted to some other thing which in its own essence is not something that is outside the bounds of the deen, right? Then you go further, perhaps they're starting to become addicted to a halal thing, but the excess of that turns into a haram thing, for example. So they're addicted to chocolate, but the level of addiction is so intense that they end up overeating, which now is now a haram thing, right? Or they're addicted to consuming, let's say, chocolate, and they eat it to the point where the teeth are rotting, and they're, kids consider kids, for example, for a second, right? And then that becomes something that's a problem. Like, that's not okay to harm yourself in that particular manner. Then you have another level of addiction where you're now addicted. So there are two levels mentioned so far: addicted to a halal thing, and it's still within the confines of the halal limits, although it's still an addiction. Okay. You have addiction to something that's halal, but that goes beyond the confines of the halal limits, and because of the transgression, because of going beyond the limits, right, it becomes haram. In of itself, it wasn't haram, like eating chocolate, for example. Going well beyond eating, a normal amount of chocolate until it causes overeating or causes dietary concerns, or it starts to cause other issues, then that becomes haram there. And there's a third level where you're addicted to something that is actually, when you're addicted to something that's actually haram in of itself, right? And no level of indulgence in that is appropriate, right? And that addiction has its own ruling. This addiction also isn't limited here, it goes further. In some of our fiqh book, we talk about an addiction of somebody to a substance, let's say, right? To the point where if they didn't get this substance, they'll die. The addiction has gone so severe, right? And the substance is so severe that if you were to cold turkey cut it, that person will pass away. There's ruling discussed there as well. What is the ruling there, and so on and so forth. Addictions has a gradient to them. Like, addiction is not just one. It's one word, but its actuality displays itself in very different forms. So exactly which form we're talking about is important. Right? So these people who are addicted now, consider the entire spectrum. Would they be counted amongst those who do things out of ignorance? Okay. So again, depending on which level of the spectrum we're talking about, consider the person who's addicted to chocolate, but they control their addiction to the point where they only eat enough that it's still halal. They don't overeat. They don't cause a physical defect in them. But whenever it's possible, they still will prefer chocolate. Okay. An addiction, side point here, on the other extreme, like the lower extreme, can still exist without any manifestation of that thing. So for example, I could still be somebody who who's absolutely addicted to chocolate, yet throughout my days eat no chocolate. So it's possible for a person to have an absolute desire to do so, to particular action, but if they're in control of their faculties, they can prevent themselves from doing that particular action. And hence, for example, let's say having a crush on somebody, an apparent without the haram aspects, that initial liking of some person, right? That initial natural occurrence of that liking, right? That in of itself is not something in your control. That's not something that gets attributed to a halal value or a haram value in its innate sense. Okay. But acting upon that, right, in a non-halal manner, yes, that does get now an allocation of a halal value or a haram value, right? In a very similar manner, being craving really chocolate. I'm giving you an example of chocolate because it's an easy example to work with. Craving chocolate, right? You can be completely addicted to it, such that the only thing you can think about is chocolate, right? But in your actions, you have enough control over your faculties that you can get rid of the instances of eating chocolate. Okay. Doctor told you you have diabetes, you can't eat chocolate, but so in your actions, even though you crave it, you're absolutely addicted to it, right? For whatever reason, I'm not looking at the past right now, just looking at and right the time at this stage. You're absolutely craving chocolate, but in terms of acting upon that craving, acting upon that particular addiction, you're in control. You don't actually act on it. Right? So here in this particular example, I extended the word addiction to not just physical manifestations of that particular action, but rather also the metaphysical background regarding it, the intense like of something, right? The absolute intense desire and craving to perform something that's separate from actually performing it. So consider these. So some of these levels, as you can now, once you understood the gradient of addictions, you can see that clearly some of these levels would be signs of ignorance, in the sense that a person is just oblivious, they aren't in control, they are actually just going through actions without necessarily being in control, right? Others, no, they're not ignorant, they're aware rather of their imbalance, right? And then they act in a controlled manner to prevent that imbalance from coming out in action, for example, right? By the way, controlling that particular imbalance also decreases the intensity of the imbalance in the person in most cases. Okay. The second question that was asked was, how does one go about looking at other similar ayat to grasp concepts as you suggested? We posted a few links in the description of the WhatsApp channel, right? Some of those are places that you can do phonetic searches. You could actually copy and paste specific words. So to start, what you could do is you could copy and paste similar words. Like let's say you're trying to see in the Holy Quran, this idea of falah, right? As one of the brothers did in their homework this week, right? This idea of falah, where is it mentioned and what is associated with the mentioning of it? So they'll copy that word from the verse, right? Let's say you open the verse on tanzil.net first, you copy that particular Arabic word, and you can paste it in some of these phonetic searches, and it'll bring you multiple verses that actually have this word used in it. Okay. Or if you can't copy it, you can type the word in English as a phonetic search. You might be able to come up with catches there as well. So you see verses that have this particular verse used. At a higher level, once you have interacted with the Holy Quran a lot, right, then you can look at the meanings of the verses and connect them too. So not necessarily the exact word is used in every place. However, the meanings are used to connect multiple verses. And many of us scholars have done that when they're collecting verses regarding a particular concept. Their true scholarship is shown in how they collect these verses. Right? A very basic collection would be just collecting the words that are very similar. But somebody who's truly a scholar at a high caliber, you'll see that they've collected verses which perhaps in terms of the words used have little connection, but in terms of the meanings that those particular words suggest, there's a stronger connection. Now that requires a much more intense interaction with the Holy Quran. A simple phonetic search won't do that. Right? I don't know of any tool that does meaning searches just yet. Okay. Well, hopefully that answers the two questions that are there. There was also one question posted on the group regarding whether attention and intention are the same thing or not. So I think the words that the brother used, if I was to just pull it up right now, was, is there a difference between intent and attention, or are they considered synonyms in this case? Right. So attention, iltifat, and intention, niya, are two very different things. Okay. And intention regarding an action. So let's say so consider, for example, right? Why are you in this class right now? Like what caused you, what motivated you, what pushed you towards coming into this particular class? Okay. So an intent for coming into this class occurs and exists at its start before the action itself, correct? Before you actually logged in and signed on, right, there had to be a driving force, a motivation for you to come here. Your intention for coming here, let's say, was seeking knowledge. Okay. So that's intention. But then while we're in classroom, we also maintain that, right? So we're trying to seek knowledge, we're trying to manifest that intention to actually seeking knowledge and learning and talking and discussing and so on and so forth, right? And there's this level of being attentive of that. So before I mentioned this idea of why you're here, right? If you were already attentive of that particular intention, right? Then that means that you actually had at the forefront of your mind the reason why you're here, right? It was apparent for you, it was clear for you, and it wasn't something that was a blurry understanding in your mind. It was crisp in your forefront of your mind. I'm here for this particular purpose. So for example, after the mentioning of why we're here, right now this concept has become slightly more crisper. Typically after the dhikr of something, after the mentioning of something, that particular thing gets our attention, right? And hence why adhkar are important in our deen, the dhikrs are important in our deen, because they bring our attention towards a particular reality. Okay, so the reality that I'm here in this channel to teach, right? This intention of mine, when I bring attention to it, it becomes more crisp, more focused, right? And less chances are there now for me to deviate from that particular intent. Question that's asked by another brother, this is the last question before we go into the content, inshallah, is can I have a balanced life if I don't take best care of my body, but keep up worship of Allah? Or is worship not deep? I don't know what that means. Is it the relationship with Allah which grows through the du'as and recitation? Is it sufficient to have a balanced life? What is balance? And then you can't be perfectly balanced and eat 5 vegetables, 200 grams of meat, 10 minutes of sunlight, have physical activity, drink 3 liters of water every day, limit your sugar intake, optimize your sleep, keep up your social activities. Okay. I think he meant these are all explanations of what he means by you can't be perfectly balanced. Okay. If I'm understanding it correctly. So we have 3 aspects of our being. We have the physical aspect, we have the intellectual aspect, and we have this spiritual aspect, right? These are the main aspects that we have. There is the social aspect, and there are other aspects as well, financial aspect and so on and so forth. But let's consider these 3 for now. Right? These are the main 3 ones that typically you talk about balance. You want to consider at the very least these 3. Okay, it builds onto the rest as well, to the entirety of the puzzle. So let's start with these 3. So the physical aspect, right? The intellectual aspect and the spiritual aspect. these three aspects. So balancing your physical body, meaning balance in the physical body means what? Balance in three areas: balance in sleep, balance in exercise, and balance in food intake. All three of these require balance, right? Now, consider what a balance, consider like a mechanism of these balances. Consider one of these balances, the mechanism that actually balances two things on two sides, right? Okay. The level of perfection and level of accuracy in this tool is different, right? Sometimes I'm weighing only kilograms on each side, and my balance is only able to equate to that, right? And we say this in the previous chapter, that there's a percent error for each tool that's used, and the refinement of that tool further decreases the percent error. So when I'm initially starting, what I mean by balance is I make sure I'm eating halal. I make sure I'm not overeating, in the sense that it's not the case that I'm always super full that I can't take another bite and I feel like just falling over, right? So in the realm of eating, perhaps the initial stages of balance means staying away from those states, okay? But it goes all the way to even making sure that like, so this if somebody progresses in that and progresses in this understanding of balance, it can go all the way to counting the number of bites they eat, right? Like my requirement is to eat 20 bites. Okay, then I'll make sure that I take 20 bites in my plate and I eat 20 bites. They get a good understanding of what 20 bite looks like for them, and they'll take that much. They won't take more than that, right? So that's balanced in the quantitative sense. It goes further in the qualitative sense, as the brother has mentioned here, for example, right? What am I eating as well, right? In a very similar manner, balance in the sleep department is that either am I sleeping 15 hours a day, 10 hours a day, every chance I get to sleep, I go ahead and I sleep. My leisure time, my free time, the first thing that comes to me is let's go sleep, right? So that's an imbalance, staying away from that particular mode of being, right? And then so the initial balance would be to stay away from that, right? Going all the way to figuring out exactly how many hours of sleep do I need and when is the best time to get this sleep. For example, a general person might need 6 hours, 7 hours. Each person's body is different, right? Figuring out how much sleep hours do I need, and then figuring out also that when do I need to give myself these sleep hours? 1 hour of sleep before midnight, right, has an entirely different effect on your person compared to 1 hour of sleep after midnight. So when you actually give yourself your sleep is extremely important. And there's studies on this, so you guys can go and research that and so on and so forth. One of the secrets of the awliya of Allah, the people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, is that they maintain their physical body as well, right? Because that allowed them to maintain their spiritual body and their intellectual body. If the physical body is not maintained, then neither the spiritual body nor the intellectual body of the person can be maintained for long, right? And find obvious imbalances occurring there, just simply due to the lack of the physical body not complying, right? Lack of sleep, good luck having attention in your salah, right? Continuous lack of sleep, and good luck controlling your anger and your waham and your shahwa and so on and so forth. You simply take the capacity from your intellect away. Okay. Lack of food, and we have the state called hangriness, for example, that kids sometimes face. Sister Nagin, you have a question? No question? Okay. Okay. So that hopefully answers the questions that are there. Let's go forward, inshallah. So far we talked about this idea that we have a nafs. We talked about this idea that this nafs has faculties to it, right? We gave explanations of the fact that we have a nafs, that we said that, look, this I is singular, it's not divisible, and so on and so forth. And those explanations were there in the text for the first session. I'm sorry, I think the text for the second session wasn't sent out. So I will probably make sure that it's sent out shortly after this class is finished. Then we looked at what it means to be, last session we ended off being saying that what it means to be success, and the criterion for success has to be the purity, the purification of that particular nafs, right? Today we start with that. So we want to start with what the object of measure is. So the object of measure for our rubric, for our person, is nafs. Whenever you have this idea of success and you have the idea of failure, right? It goes hand in hand with the idea of meeting a set criteria. And hence, meeting that set criteria is called success, and not meeting that set criteria is called failure, right? So consider, for example, two scenarios. Someone says that I was successful in my driver's exam. That means that there was a rubric, there was rules that they had to follow, a criterion that was in the mind of the tester, and they went through that exam and they met all, if not most, of the points, and hence they passed. So now they come out and say, I'm successful in that particular driver's test. Consider the second scenario too. It's a little bit different. A person says, I was very successful in high school. Okay. So here, the person's worldview takes a very important seat. It takes the seat of making sure what their criterion was. Let's say a person's criteria for success was that they were very involved with sports activities and extracurricular activities and made sure that they had a lot of friends and it was a socially enjoyable time for them. Okay? Let's say this is part and parcel of their high school experience, and without these things, they don't consider their high school experience to be successful. For such a person, even if their percentage that they got at the end was all A pluses and so on and so forth, if those factors were lacking, then they simply have not met the criterion, and they'll say what? They'll feel unsuccessful. Okay. Side point here, an extremely important point regarding our persons. We sometimes don't pay attention to our own worldview regarding our successful life, right? So as homework for today, right? Hopefully when you guys finish this class or afterwards, please consider what your criterion for a successful life is, right? So consideration of that particular criterion can help you. Why? Because paying attention to what that particular criterion is, when you're actually feeling down and you feel like, oh, I feel like I'm not successful. I feel like I'm a failure now. If these thoughts start to come, right? Then you have an actual criterion to go back to and say, wait a second, when I was discussing the criterion for my life and success of it, right? I added A, B, C, and D. Right? If I'm meeting those things and I'm still feeling not successful, then I have to go back to the source of that. Why am I not feeling successful? Right? It could very well be that it's not an intellectually founded feeling, right? It's not actually a feeling founded in rationale. Perhaps it's a feeling found in an imbalance of your life, stemming from sleep, stemming from food, stemming from certain events that might have occurred, and so on and so forth. Okay. So, side point for our persons to consider. It's extremely important to understand what the object of measure is. For us as Muslims, the object of measure was what? As Surah Shams said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. A person who purifies their nafs is the person who's reached falah. They're the people who have reached success. Okay. And we talked previously that this success has to be done. The success has to be linked to the nafs itself, not an associate of the nafs. Because it's your success, not the success of your car, your house, your wife, your kids. No, it's your success that we're trying to see. Are you a successful person? But then now it comes back to the success, the object of measure for success ends up becoming your nafs with all its capacities that we discussed. Okay. We also mentioned right now that success is always associated with some sort of a criteria. But this leads us into now chapter 1 of as unit number A, for example. We have foundations. So unit we covered previously was understanding ourselves. This particular unit is called pre-ahkam. Brother Mujahid was supposed to teach it. Unfortunately, he is not feeling well. Please pray for him. Inshallah, next week he can continue teaching this particular unit. Right? That's the link between the past unit and this particular unit. Right? That now the criterion for the success for your nafs, right? Because if success is measured, if success is mentioned, then there has to be a criterion that the success is based off of, right? So this criterion for your nafs now, this purification, if you will, right? What is that? We don't consider that now. So here we're going to have a little discussion in class. Okay. My claim is, and we'll get to my claim after the discussion, I guess. I want to make the claim and then tinge the discussion. So think of a plausible scenario, and please use the chat or the mic to explain the scenario, if you will, right? Where absolute lawlessness exists. There's no laws at all whatsoever. Can you consider a scenario where absolute lawlessness exists in humans? Can such a phenomenon be there? Can it be that we as humans have absolute lawlessness? Can you guys hear me? Uh-oh. I've been talking to myself for the past. Okay. This happened once. My internet had like hung and then everything seemed to be going well. I realized I was talking to myself. So perfect. So consider atheists and their beliefs. Do you so give me a scenario where you believe in absolute lawlessness. What laws are you referring to? So I'm not talking about physical laws. I'm talking about laws that are regarded with one's behavior. So I'm talking about hukuk, the laws pertaining to the actions of mankind. Okay. Any takers? So I'll give you an example to help you think. Okay. So it's true that they don't have certain laws. So I didn't say religious laws for this purpose. I'm saying absolute lawlessness. So an atheist, although they don't have a leader to follow like our Rasul, right? They still have certain laws that they abide by. Even during war, there are certain laws that a person abides by. So if I give you an example for war, a person will not shoot himself. Okay. A person will not shoot his own fellows. A person will not, when there's water available to them when they're thirsty, not drink it. Yeah. Ahsan, very good. So laws. So now you guys have if you're thinking and you're saying these things that everyone follows some laws, and you're reaching my claim. My claim was what? I'm saying now after the discussion. Laws are an innate aspect of humans. Yeah. And laws are innate because they're linked to your intellectual faculty. Humans, by definition, have this faculty of intellect. Therefore, all humans innately, at some degree, have some laws that they follow. I'll give an example. If a person lives alone on an island, yeah, So if they lose their will to live and they're in too much pain, they won't go around killing others, for example. They won't go and have a party, for example. Right? That particular understanding of theirs that they've lost the will to live, they might go towards suicide or go towards counseling help and so on and so forth. Their actions are still abiding by some criterion. Doesn't transcend and transgress that criterion. So consider an individual on an island alone now, okay? Even such a person will separate his sleeping quarters from his washroom quarters and he'll separate his washroom quarters from his food quarters. Right? Innately, the separation of why he should separate his sleeping quarters from his washroom quarters and washroom quarters to his food quarters, right? What drove man towards this particular idea? That, hey, this is the place that I'll be cooking and making my food and eating my food and so on. This is the place I'll be sleeping. This is the place I'll be going to the washroom. They have to be separate places. They can't be just all in one place, right? This innate separation came from where? What gave order to man to do such a thing? Well, it was his faculty of intellect. Right? These are self-made laws, right? As long as he has intellect, right? The intellect now sets for man certain laws. So the claim here is there is no such thing as a lawless society. Consider absolute chaos. Well, in human society, there's no such thing. Even if a riot takes place, let's say an entire, look at revolutions in the past. Even there, laws, even not apparently judicial laws from the government, but certain laws are maintained, right? Let's say the one who is the most powerful person, everybody listens to them, let's say. The person who has the most, I don't know, food stock, people listen to them. Right? And the basis of those laws goes back to your intellect. So the absolute nature of laws is not something that can be taken away from man. Laws in every society, in every place, in every instance, they're part of the fitra of man. This is what I'm trying to come up with. Meaning they're innate to man. They're innate because man has intellect. And the intellect then dictates how a person should and should not be. Okay. The second discussion on in today's class is about this idea of the existence of laws and the lack of an absolutely lawless society or absolutely lawless situation or scenario. Okay. How are we doing for time? Okay, perfect. Perfect. Well, I will not be finishing this chapter today. 2 hours. We don't have 2 hours. We have like 21 minutes. Okay. I will not be finishing this chapter today. I'll just be helping Brother Mujahid start it and express the foundations of it. Inshallah, next week when he comes, he can finish the chapter for you guys. Okay. I like your joke. 2 hours. Okay. So laws now, in essence, we also considered are also based on some sort of foundation, right? So even seemingly arbitrary laws are not entirely arbitrary when you factor in the person making the law, right? With their explicit persona. So based on their experiences, their upbringing, the environment that they're in, their genetic buildup that they've inherited, so on and so forth, right? So even in laws now, at a level, now we're going one step further, right? First of all, there's no such thing as a lawless environment. Secondly speaking, there's no such thing as an absolutely arbitrary law. So each law also has some level of foundation, some level of justification. Okay. It could be something that is, well, this particular person's persona based on his experiences, XYZ. Okay. I'm not going towards the validation of laws yet. I'm just saying that laws are innate to humans, right? And these innate laws are never arbitrary, even though they may seem to be arbitrary at sometimes. Never arbitrary. They always go back to some level and some factor, period. And that factor could be something as little as the persona of the person making the law. Okay. So the laws that this specific person with the specific upbringing, the specific environment that they were raised in, their specific genetic makeup that they inherited, the specific experiences that they had, well, this particular specific person will no longer make absolutely arbitrary laws. Right? They'll make laws specific to their scenario and their person. And these laws then, hence, will have roots in one or more sectors of this person's life. Now, the inclination for somebody to now follow these laws, aside from the person who made it, is based on how many of those root factors one has common to the lawmaker. Okay. Let's say we're all in a room, there's one AC in the room, and all of us feel cold all the time. One person comes and says, I'm the lawmaker of the room and I will turn the AC to 16 degrees Celsius. That's really cold, right? The willingness of the rest of us in that room to follow that law, because in our personal experiences and our personal build-up, in our personas, we're not people who like the cold, let's assume. The rest of us don't like the cold, right? The willingness to follow that particular law will be significantly lower. As opposed to, let's say, all of us like the heat, and someone comes and says, I'm going to put the temperature of this room to 26 degrees or 25.5 degrees. Right? And let's say that's the ideal temperature that we all want to follow anyways. And the willingness, because we share the same root factors that the person making the law shared with us, right? Our willingness to go and follow that particular law is there. Okay. Another example. The driving speed limit on the 401 is 100 kilometers an hour, right? We all share this root factor that we want to be able to drive safely and within lines and not drive in a very chaotic environment and an unpredictable environment, right? So those of us who share this particular notion with the lawmaker, right? This root factor is shared for those people. At that level that it's shared, they'll be willingly obeying that law. Sometimes it's not shared absolutely. So you see a person going 120. Okay. Other times you see it's absolutely sure. They're like, okay, I know it has to be. You have to have like the uncertainty level on the highway should be so low, right? That I'm gonna make sure that every turn that I do has an indicator on it, and every time I'm on the highway, I absolutely never go beyond the speed limit. I maintain the distance between me and the car in front of me, so when I brake, that I can, all of this just to absolutely minimize any unpredictability in a driving experience to make sure that no accidents happen. That's it. If a person is that much in tune with the law, and they'll follow it like that, right? They'll be like this careful driver. And as their gradation of similarities with the root factors diminishes or distances itself from the origin, which is whatever the lawmaker decided, right? And their willingness towards following that law will differ. One person said, you know what, driving 120 is okay, but 130 and 40, no, for sure not. I can't afford them. And the cause of that could be different too. So the deviation is rooted in the lack of the root factors, but the cause of it could be something very different. Like, for example, I'm scared of getting a ticket in this example. Okay. So this is a more detailed talk about the foundations of the laws now. So laws are innate to humans, true. Laws are not arbitrary, true. And then the willing following of the law, because of this willing feature of it, right, depends on our syncness with the law. How instinct are we with that law? How many of the root factors of that particular law do we adhere to, accept, think they're correct? Okay. So sometimes the law is based on a foundation which is other than the persona of a person, but rather the assumed identity of a collective. Okay, so you have now judicial laws. So driving laws are something that I explain right now, right? So here we have democratic laws, for example, meaning that the majority of a collective comes and decides on a law. And the law gains legitimacy by the means of popularity. So if today in this room, there's 20 of us, let's say, right? If 18 of us want the thermostat to be 16, then the correct uh, law to be followed is 16, let's say. So the simple popularity grants validity now. But this type of law exists in this world, right? We're not going toward what's right or wrong right now. We're just saying these are the types. Understand the types. But the validity now for this law comes from popularity. Now we have aspects of law. Laws are innate to humans, level 1. We're going to talk about that. Laws are not arbitrary. They're founded on some factors. We talked about that, right? Our willingness to follow a particular law links to the commonality of the factors that we have with that law. Talked about that, right? And now we talked about the validation of the law. The validation of the law, the criterion can sometimes be popularity itself. In other places, the validation might be something completely different. Okay? But every law has these 4 areas to consider. Every law has these 4 areas to consider. Okay. So the inclination to follow that law was based off of what? Acceptability, right? And the ability of a collective view. And then that gave it that particular law legitimacy when you were able to make a collective view go a particular way. So let's say I wanted to make a law that in this room of 20 people, everybody should drink Pepsi. Before I make that law, a smart me would do what? I would first come and I would introduce what Pepsi is and tell you all the positive aspects of Pepsi, right? Make you taste Pepsi a little bit if I can. Somehow get you on board with the likability factor, your root factors in line with me, such that when I finally make that law and I say that Pepsi is allowed to be drunk in this room, right? All of you are already on board. Okay. For the validation of the law, if it was based off of popularity in this room, I've achieved it very simply. I just have to control the way the populace thinks, and then I can control the laws by which the populace acts upon. It's a very powerful point to consider here. Okay. So the criterion for validation, in this case that I gave was popularity, right? Also significantly determines the method by which laws should be made, or laws can be made, motivations behind the laws as well. Okay. Anybody have any questions here so far? You're gonna get Pepsi, chai, cheeseburger, French fries, and chow. No questions? Everything is clear so far? So let me ask you guys a question. What are the 4 things that a law must have? I'll repeat that point in a bit after somebody answers this. What are the 4 things that a law must have? Making sure this message is not from Sheikh Mahdi. What are the 4 things that a law must have? Any takers? So I'll write this down. The first level was the fact that there's no such thing as absolute lawlessness, right? Second thing we said was that there's no such thing as arbitrary laws, right? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So inclination, when I said inclination, I said that how many common factors you have with the law that's being made, right? With the basis of the law that's being made or the law itself. Okay. So for example, in the case of the Pepsi that I gave, if I made you taste Pepsi and told you how great it is and it can make you fly and I made you believe all that, right? Then your commonality factors with this Pepsi goes significantly higher. You like this particular thing already. So now when in a judicial level, I come and say Pepsi is allowed, well, you won't stand against it. They'll be like, yes, Pepsi is good for you. I like it. It tastes so good. It makes me fly. If you believe that. Right? Simply changing your paradigm towards that particular object that I want to make a law about, right, can make the creation of that law easier for me. This could be worked in, I don't know what that means. So this, somebody wrote clarity, enforceability, fairness, good. So maybe, I don't know, I can't understand what they mean by that. Well, the point that I want to say here is that this particular notion that I explained can be used in both a good dimension and a bad dimension. Let's say I'm a Baba at home and I want to make the law in my house that, listen, that we will not binge watch TV, right? There'll be certain, like a certain level of how much we spend our time on a TV, right? So now that I've understood how laws innately work, right, this should help me with making those particular laws in my personal life, either for myself or those around me. If I get others around me to understand what the right thing to do is, then expecting them to do the right thing becomes more plausible. Okay. Knowing the right thing is the step towards doing the right thing. Okay. In the case and in my lawmaking as well, I have to account into that commonality factors, right? If I cold turkey go to my kids and I say, starting tomorrow, absolutely no TV, that's not gonna fly. Especially if my kids have been so far used to watching, let's say, an hour, 2 hours, God forbid, more TV every single day. Okay. Going up to my kids and saying absolutely cold turkey, no television starting right now, isn't gonna work in that scenario. Right? So that considering the willingness to obey, meaning based off of where their capacity is and how much I have now explained to them about why I'm making this particular law. And it has to be explained not as X, Y, Z is the right thing to do. Rather, you have to understand, make them be on your team, really, right? And if you could do that, right, then you might win and create a law that they might follow. This is also negatively used in societies. When certain laws were passed, before those laws came before those laws came about, or certain wars when they were initiated in our history, in human history, right? Before those wars were actually initiated, a lot of back end propaganda was done. So, for example, let's talk about the Iraq War, right? The war on terror, so on and so forth. The terms were coined for it. And before the initiation of the war, a lot of talk was done regarding demonization of one side and claims such as that there's weapons of mass destruction and so on and so forth, right? When the populace believed in something, it became easier to pass that law. It became easier to push the populace towards a particular direction. Okay? It could be negatively used as well, and it has been in our history. Again, why did that happen? Well, the validation of the law in society was set as the view of the popular, the popular view. And guess what? The popular view is changeable. Right? It's manipulatable, if you will. Okay. You asked a very good question. So this is why I said that the validation of the law, if it's set to popularity, right, then we run into problems, we run into troubles. If the validation of the law is set to actuality, not popularity, right, then troubles aren't there. It could be the case that every single one of the people in this room is inclined to smoke cigarettes. They're addicted to it in their minds. But they know cigarettes are bad and they pass a law that we will not smoke cigarettes in this room. The popular desire of the people in this room, right, isn't what is the validation criteria, but rather an actual criteria is set. Actual criteria are harder to manipulate. What if the majority of a society agrees upon a morally correct law for a society, but decides later the same society, but decades later, sorry, the same society is now split 50%, like 50 saying pro and 50% con. And many are no longer willing to comply, okay? Should the law, although morally and divinely correct, no longer be enforced? So when you say that 50% people are split, that means 50% have now said that the validity of the law is no longer the actuality, but the popularity. So the 50% are requesting for a change in game. If your original game was that the validation criteria for laws is going to be actuality, not popularity. Right? If it was the other way around, if from the get-go your criterion was just popularity, right, then you're in trouble because now popularity is manipulatable. And here's an excellent example of how it can be. You can have a correct law, and then by manipulating the society, let's say I want you guys had a correct law of saying no drugs, and I introduce enough marijuana and enough drugs into that society through illegal means that the majority of that particular society was okay with drugs, it becomes very easy to get rid of that law within a decade. So the criterion of validation of a particular law in our worldview is extremely important. It's directly linked to how manipulatable a society can become and be. Remember, this is pre-ahkam now, right? So this covers the second portion of this chapter, right? First portion was the object of measure, that it has to be the nafs, and success means that the nafs had to be following a particular criterion, right? Then we said that there is no such thing as no criterion. Absolute lawlessness does not exist, right? Then we said that laws which are innate to man, and we said that laws, not only are they innate to man, they're also not arbitrary. They're always founded on something, right? And we said that the likability factor of laws is linked to the root factors that the people following the laws share with the lawmaker or the law itself. Okay. And we talked about the criterion for validity of that particular law. It could be popularity or it could be actuality. Okay. And that concludes the session for today. We talked a little about pre-ahkam before we even enter into ahkam. There are certain connections we had to make from the nafs and how the nafs is linked to this, right? And then some aspects of laws needed to be understood by us. We've done all that. Inshallah, next session, Brother Mujahid will continue with this particular course and take you through the chapter. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.